Today's video is sponsored by Saley, of which more in a bit. It's Rail 200 this year, and all eyes are on the Stockton and Darlington Railway, which in 1825 became the world's first public railway to haul passengers using a steam locomotive. That locomotive, locomotion, would become a legend in the history of the Industrial Revolution. That's not what I'm here to talk about today, though. I thought I'd shine a spotlight on Darlington Station. Darlington is a junction station dating back to 1841 and a major stop on the East Coast Main Line. Now, this is not the first Darlington station. That was a short distance away at North Road, which is now the site of the Hopetown Darlington Museum. Well worth a visit if you're into your railway history. What happened was this. The Stockton and Darlington Railway initially ran from Whitton Colliery to Stockton-on-Tees. It was primarily intended for hauling coal with passengers as a secondary concern. Despite some misgivings from the usual crowd of naysayers, it proved a success, and so the S&D's directors looked to expand. They built a goods-only branch to Croft-on-Tees, which opened in October 1829. It passed right through the site of what would be Darlington Station, but at the time the S&DR seemingly didn't see much potential in building a station here. This despite the fact that Darlington was a market town and a growing industrial centre. But 1829 was a big year for the railways. The Stockton and Darlington Railway's engineer, George Stephenson, had something in the works that would make a far bigger commotion than locomotion. A railway called the Liverpool and Manchester Railway, and with his son Robert he would design the most advanced locomotive ever built, the Rocket. This engine and this railway between them proved that trains could be more than steam-powered mules plodding from colliery to canal. They could change the world. And they would. Before we get too far into this new dawn of travel, I think it's an appropriate time to talk about this video's sponsor, Saley, which is a great boon whether you're the globe-trotting type or a casual traveller. For instance, a friend of mine is over from America, and he said that he's been having a lot of trouble using his phone here in the UK, because he can only use it where there's a Wi-Fi hotspot, if he doesn't want to get absolutely rinsed on roaming charges. And that's where he could really use Saley. Saley uses your phone's eSIM function to get you all the data you need at a great price. It works on any phone that has an eSIM function, so you're good whether you're on iOS or Android. What you do is, you download the app, you select your data plan, and Saley will connect when you reach your destination. There are over 200 destinations served and multiple data plans to suit you, including regional or global plans. What's more, viewers of this channel can get 15% off their data plans. Just go to saley.com/jago and enter the code JAGO at checkout to get 15% off. Or use the link in the description below, or this QR code. That's what I should have told my friend. Oh well, I'm sure he'll message me if he needs to. Anyway, back to the 1830s. Following the opening of the Liverpool and Manchester Railway, dozens of proposals were made for schemes to connect the towns and cities of Britain. Many would fall by the wayside for lack of capital or common sense, but those that made it would form the railway network we still use to this day. One of the most important routes to have its genesis in this era was the East Coast Main Line connecting London and Edinburgh. But that would take a while to be completed. What actually happened was that a number of different companies built sections of what would become the main line. One such company was the Great North of England Railway, and with a name like that, you know they meant business. Their goal was to build a railway from York to Newcastle. As part of that, they bought the Stockton and Darlington's Croft branch and incorporated it into their route. Their name might have been ambitious, but it wasn't backed up by their bank account. They only got as far as Darlington before running out of money, and so on the 31st of March 1841 they built their own Darlington Station. That was actually very slightly east of the current station, where the lines that bypass the station are today. It was sometimes known as Darlington Central or Darlington North Eastern. But the 1840s saw what we now call the railway mania, when it was full steam ahead for engineers, dreamers, and con artists alike. If there had been a lot of proposals in the 1830s, that was nothing compared to the 1840s. In 1844, the Newcastle and Darlington Junction Railway opened, succeeding where the Great North of England had failed, and turning Darlington into a through station. There followed a series of mergers. None of these are super important for the purposes of this video, but in 1846, the Newcastle and Darlington Junction bought the Great North of England out and became the York and Newcastle Railway. The following year, it amalgamated with the Newcastle and Berwick Railway and became the York, Newcastle and Berwick Railway. Much of this was carried out under the auspices of George Hudson, an entrepreneur known as the Railway King. He would be dethroned in 1849 when the powers that be decided to actually look into where all that money was coming from and where it was going. Finally, in 1854, the York, Newcastle and Berwick Railway became part of the North Eastern Railway. As you can probably tell from all that, the East Coast Main Line, at least the Northern English part of it, took shape pretty quickly. By 1860, it had become necessary to rebuild the station to accommodate the increasing traffic. In 1867, Darlington Station was renamed Darlington Bank Top, a name it would keep until 1934. For the purposes of clarity, though, I'm going to keep calling it Darlington if it's all the same to you. But something more drastic than a name change was needed by the 1880s. The final leg of the East Coast Main Line was the Great Northern Railway from South Yorkshire to London, and now the ECML was one of the most important transport arteries in Britain. Darlington, too, had greatly expanded since the 1840s, becoming an important cloth-producing town. Therefore, it merited something a little grander. So that's what the North Eastern Railway's architects built. The design was carried out by T.E. Harrison and William Bell and completed in 1887. That is the station we have today. That series of mergers may have clued you in that many of the railways did not make as much money as speculators hoped. But the North Eastern Railway was an exception, and they were not shy about splashing the cash. And you can see that with the grandeur of Darlington Station, with its vast overall roof. This was a junction serving several lines. As well as the ECML, there were lines to Saltburn, Penrith, Barnard Castle, Bishop Auckland and Richmond, among many other destinations. The Stockton and Darlington Railway, which had once been the main line to Croft's branch line, was now reduced to a local branch line to the East Coast Main Line. 1885 had seen the construction of a major locomotive shed just north of the main station, a demonstration of how important a junction this was. The North Eastern Railway would last all the way through to 1923. It wasn't mismanagement or poverty that would bring its end, though, but forcible government intervention. In the aftermath of the First World War, many railway companies were struggling to survive, but rather than bail them out or nationalise them, the government grouped them together into 4 much larger companies. The idea was that the wealthy railways, like the North Eastern, could prop up the poorer railways, like everyone the North Eastern was grouped together with. The new management at Darlington were the London and North Eastern Railway, and I can't help but wonder if that name was an acknowledgement of the importance of the old North Eastern to the whole enterprise. In 1925, the station gained some distinguished residents. 2 surviving locomotives of the Stockton and Darlington Railway would be moved from North Road to Bank Top. These were Derwent and the OG Darlington locomotive, Locomotion. Both had recently participated in the railway centenary celebration. I suppose for the sake of pedantry I should point out that Locomotion had been so heavily rebuilt by this time that it barely counted as the original locomotive, but let people have their fun, I say. Derwent and Locomotion would remain plinthed in the station for about 50 years, until they were moved back to North Road in 1975. Derwent is still there, in fact. Poor though the LNER were, they would operate some of the most glamorous express trains of all time. The Flying Scotsman, the Night Scotsman, The coronation, the Silver Jubilee, all would pass through Darlington. Nationalisation would finally come in 1948. Despite the optimism of the new British Railways organisation, this was not the railway's finest hour. The pressure was on to modernise and to cut costs, and as part of this, Dr. Richard Beeching produced his infamous report, The Reshaping of British Railways. This would recommend cutting hundreds of miles of local railways in the mistaken belief that the purpose of railways was to turn a profit rather than get people from A to B. If Darlington Station could talk, it would no doubt have told him that in its experience, that's a futile aim. So the 1960s saw the closure of the lines to Penrith, Richmond and Barnard Castle. But Darlington itself was never in danger. The East Coast Main Line has always been busy. In 1991 the line through it was electrified. In some parallel universe it might have been on the High Speed 2 route, specifically Phase 2B, the leg to Leeds. But that was cancelled in 2021 under the Integrated Rail Plan for the North and Midlands, which is almost as depressing a read as the Beeching report. But that's not to say that the future looks bleak. In fact, Darlington is currently seeing its biggest changes since 1887. A £140 million investment that will see the station dramatically expanded. There is to be a new concourse, 2 additional platforms and a new car park. This isn't actually the first time something like this has been proposed. The Tees Valley Metro scheme back in the 2000s would have seen the station upgraded as part of a general revamp of several North East England routes. But now it's actually going ahead. It had been hoped to have the whole thing completed by 2025 and the 200th anniversary of the opening of the Stockton and Darlington Railway. But bureaucracy and delays in raising money have pushed this back until 2026. The northeastern structure will remain being, as it is, Grade 2 star listed. But what this revamp means is that there will once again be platforms to the east of the current station on the very same lines that the original station was built on. I guess history really does go in circles. Well, I do hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please do leave a like and consider subscribing for more. The 2 main sources I consulted for today's video were Shildon to Stockton by Roger Darsley and Dennis Lovett, and Darlington to Leamside to Newcastle by Roger Darsley. I would like as always to thank my donors on Ko-fi, on Patreon, and here on YouTube for your generous support. You are the Stockton and Darlington Railway to my Croft branch line. I'd also like to thank Saley for sponsoring today's video. Check out the link in the description below to take advantage of their generous offer. And I will see you all again very soon. Cheerio.